Better thinking, faster decisions, bigger ROI. This is the Finding 12 Minutes podcast. The idea is simple. If you can find 12 minutes of efficiency in your day, you will gain an hour every week, and that changes how we work. Each episode is focused on practical ways to use AI, technology, and smarter strategies to help you move faster, think clearer, and get more done with less effort. So let's find your 12 minutes. Welcome back to the Finding 12 Minutes podcast. Again, this is kind of where we focus on those practical ways to kind of improve the way we work, the way we innovate and use technology. This week, I want to talk about why most of our innovation systems look like our organization. And I really want to kind of frame this around this concept of Conway's law. And this topic came up during a conversation with a colleague last week when we were discussing why organizations can invest in integrated platforms, new workflows, AI, even sophisticated technology applications, yet still produce fragmented results. The tools are connected, but ultimately the teams are not. The technology may be modern, but the work still moves through departmental handoffs, approval queues, disconnected data, competing priorities. And that conversation really led us to the concept of Conway's law. So Mel Conway introduced this idea in 1968 with a paper. And the paper was titled, How Do Committees Invent? And his basic argument was, any organization that designs a system will produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organization's communication structure. Or more simply put, what we build tends to look like how we work together. And that applies to software applications. It applies to our products, our processes, our policies, our customer experiences, even our innovation programs. And now, more modernly or more increasingly, what we see is that artificial intelligence systems are falling into that same camp. So what does Conway's law actually mean? Well, Conway's law is often summarized by saying that companies ship their org charts. That is close, but it misses the important distinction. The law is really not about the boxes and lines in the formal organizational chart. It's about the communication structure underneath it. Who regularly shares information within your organization? Who makes decisions together? Who has access to the same data? Who understands fully the customer problem? Who communicates directly? You start asking yourself all these questions, right? Who communicates through service tickets or documents or meetings or management layers? And those communication patterns shape the systems that the organization creates. So imagine a company where sales, marketing, operations, finance, and customer service rarely work together. Each department develops their own tools, terminology, metric, data, processes. The customer believes they're interacting with one company. In reality, they may be interacting with 5 different organizations that happen to share the same logo. Sales has one version of the customer, finance has another, operations and customer service each have their own version. The resulting customer experience will be reflected in those internal divisions. Technology did not necessarily create the fragmentation. It encoded the fragmentation that already existed. A useful way to think about the Conway's law is this. Every interface inside a system usually represents the relationship inside the organization. Another way to put it is that you are what you eat, right? That old adage. When the relationship is strong, the interface can be simple. When the relationship is weak, the interface often becomes a handoff, an approval, a workaround, or it creates bottlenecks. And so what we come is organizations frequently treat these problems as technology problems. Reports get fragmented so that they need to go purchase a new data platform. Approvals are slow, so they have to add another workflow to the software. Departments can't find information, so they end up building another knowledge repository system. Now with AI, the outputs are inconsistent, so they purchase another model or another AI tool or another chatbot. And those tools may help, but if the communication structure remains unchanged, the system will often inherit the same organizational boundaries as the old one. And this is especially important when we're thinking about AI. AI can accelerate the work being performed within each department. It does not automatically align those departments around shared outcomes, though. Marketing can produce more content, sales can draft more proposals, operations can create more reports, legal can review more documents. Each group may become more productive, but the organization can still remain disconnected. You end up with faster silos. The silos don't go away, they're just faster silos. AI can make a well-designed system faster. It can also make a broken system faster. And this is where Conway's law connects directly with that finding 12 minutes principle. The principle starts, we start with that is start small, measurable improvements that compound across people, teams, and organizations. But individual efficiency does not always create organizational efficiency. One employee may save 12 minutes drafting a document and then lose 30 minutes because another department lacks context, uses different information, requires the document to be reworked. Finding time is now valuable. Protecting that time as work moves across the organization becomes even more valuable. So let's consider the proposal development process. Business development identifies the opportunity, marketing coordinates the response, the technical experts help developing content and the solution. The finance folks come in and can help with pricing, legal reviews, executives finally approve. If these groups communicate mainly through document versions or emails or deadlines or review comments, the proposal often feel assembled rather than designed. Every department contributes to its individual sections, but no one consistently owns the complete story. Artificial intelligence may help improve the writing within each section and may even produce more content or better content. But if every group uses different prompts, different sources, different assumptions, even different terminology, AI can make the final proposal feel less consistent rather than more consistent. Proposal then ends up mirroring the communication structure that's behind it. Now let's consider product development. The product team conducts, customer survey, customer discovery, engineering reviews the requirements, sales is out there promising features and enhancements, customer support's identifying recurring problems, operations manages the implementation. If these groups only connect at formal stage gates, the resulting product will be filled with organizational seams. The product team may understand the customer problem, but the engineering team receives only the feature request. Support may understand why customers are frustrated, but that information arrives after the feature's already been designed. And then if you look at sales, they may understand why customers are frustrated, but the information arrives after the feature's already been designed. So sales may understand that what the market is requesting, but those insights are filtered through a roadmap discussion that's held once a quarter. Product becomes a collection of departmental requests instead of coherent response to a customer problem. So finally, if you consider an innovation lab, an organization could create a separate innovation group and give it permission to experiment. That lab produces demos. It could produce pilots and prototypes, MVPs, even just product presentations. But operations was not involved. The security team was not involved. Procurement wasn't involved. Employees expect to use the solution weren't even involved. There's no process owner, no adoption plan, no implementation budget, and no path into the daily workflows. Innovation remains isolated because the innovation team was isolated. This connects directly to the distinction between the innovation theater and the innovation systems from the last episode. Innovation team may be doing excellent work, and the organizational structure makes the implementation unlikely. The problem is not necessarily the competence of the people, it's the structure that the outcome predicted. So if we wanted to use Conway's law intentionally, once you understand what Conway's law is, you can begin to start using it intentionally in various ways. Instead of accepting the existing communication structure and allowing it to dictate the system and start the system or the outcome that you want, right? So you're not starting with any particular system and you're not getting it to dictate outcomes. You would then create a communication patterns that it needs to produce. So we're starting with the communication side of this. And this approach often is called the inverse Conway maneuver. Rather than allowing the architecture to passively mirror the organization, leaders intentionally align team ownership and communication with the architecture or the business outcome that they want to create. This does not always require major reorganization. Reorganizations are expensive, they're disruptive, and frequently become substitutes for solving the underlying problems. Sometimes the answer is just a persistent cross-functional team. Sometimes it's clearly defined outcomes and owners. And it may be shared backlog and have a common set of data definitions and have, direct access for users, or a measurement of success is, similar across all teams that are participating. And so this principle is pretty straightforward. Design the interaction between people before designing the system that they build. When you want to end with a very specific customer experience, you need to create an end-to-end accountability. And when you want a reusable AI platform, connecting business owners, data owners, IT, security, legal, and operations, you want to do that from the beginning. When you want an innovation that scales, involve the process owner and adoption owner during the discovery, not after the pilot. You cannot create or repeatedly throw work across the organizational boundaries and expect seamless results. And so if we do a 12-minute check on this Conway's law, here's a practical exercise that you can complete in 12 minutes. Choose one workflow that regular creates delays, confusion, rework. Where's those key friction points? It could be proposal development, it could be customer onboarding, could be project initiation. Maybe it's product approvals or an AI implementation, or something as simple as, weekly or monthly reporting. For the first 3 minutes, define the intended outcome. Do not describe the department's task. Describe the result from the customer or the business perspective. You want to start with what are the customers or what is the business perspective, and not necessarily the task at hand. Instead of saying marketing needs to prepare a better proposal, say the organization needs to present one clear, accurate, and persuasive solution to the client. For minutes 4 through 6, identify every team that touches that workflow. Write down where the work moves from one group to another. Do not document the ideal process. Document what actually happens. For the minutes through 7 through 9, look at points where context is lost. And what does that mean? Ask yourself questions like, where does someone have to re-enter information? Where does work sit in a queue? Where are decisions that are being reopened and redecided over and over again? Where did two departments use two different processes or definitions or whatever? Where does someone review a document without understanding the reasoning behind it? And then in the final 3 minutes, you want to choose one interaction to redesign it. Bring the downstream reviewer into the process earlier. Establish one person who owns the complete process or outcome. Create a shared resource of information. Replace a status meeting with a working decision session. And the key there is decision session, just not another meeting. Give two teams a common performance measure. The goal is not to redesign the whole organization. The goal is to identify one place where communication structure is creating unnecessary system complexity. So ask yourself these questions. There are 3 questions. Does the work move accordingly to the customer's needs or according to the departmental boundaries? Second question, where does this information have to be translated as it moves between teams? And then finally, the third question is, who owns the final outcome from beginning to end? When no one owns the whole outcome, every team optimizes its own part. The organization can become locally efficient but remain collectively ineffective or inefficient. So when we think about Conway's law, it's ultimately a leadership issue. Leaders design reporting structures, incentives, budgets, who makes decisions, approval requirements, how often we meet, any performance measures. Those choices determine how people communicate. You cannot tell teams to collaborate while measuring them against conflicting departmental goals. You cannot demand an enterprise AI strategy while allowing every function to develop separate data, separate governance, separate tools, and separate workflows. You cannot ask for speed while requiring 5 layers for approval. And you cannot ask employees to think about the customer journey while giving them the responsibility only for one narrow step. Structure is not an administrative detail. It is part of the product architecture. Sometimes the fastest way to improve a system is not to add another feature. It is to shorten the communication path between the people responsible for building it. So wrapping this up, Conway's law gives us a very simple diagnostic. When a product, process, platform, or AI system feels fragmented, look upstream at the organization that's created it. And then ask yourself this simple question. What communication pattern did this system inherit? Before purchasing another platform or launching an AI pilot, spend 12 minutes mapping out the handoffs. You may discover that the technology is doing exactly what the organization designed it to do. Our systems are already telling us the story on how the organization works. The question is whether or not the story is how you intended it to write it. So find your 12 minutes, redesign the system, and make sure that you're actually focusing on the problem and getting the solutions to kind of move through.
And that's your 12 minutes. If you found value in this, share it with someone who needs to work smarter, not harder. And remember, small efficiencies compound. Find 12 minutes a day and the results take care of themselves. I'll see you in the next episode.